Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are still waiting for a few more people to join, and as soon as they do, we'll get started soon. Thanks for your patience. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our Extending SharePoint to All Your Users. My name is Jean Lozano, and I'll be your moderator today. If you are having any issues with audio or seeing the presentation, please request assistance through the chat panel. As a reminder, all lines will remain muted until we get started. If you are having difficulty seeing the slides, you can use the full screen feature in the bottom right corner of the top right corner if you're using Link 2013. You may also submit questions at any point during this webinar within the chat panel, and we'll address those during the Q&A session. Today's slides and webinar recording will be sent to all attendees tomorrow. Please make sure you stay until the end of the webinar for a chance to win a Microsoft Surface tablet. Okay, let's get started. Today, our speakers are Mark Seeley, Intellinet's President and Senior Partner, and Ed Soma, Okta Senior Product Marketing Manager. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Thanks, Jean, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Mark Seeley, President and Senior Partner of Intellinet. Today, as Jean mentioned, our featured speaker is Ed Soma, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Okta. Prior to Okta, Ed led marketing for Motorola's global mobile infrastructure, applications, and services business, and we're delighted to have him with us today. Before we get started, for those not familiar with Intellinet, we are a management consulting and Microsoft-centric technology services firm. We've worked with a lot of you on the phone call here and had the privilege to work with about 900 clients over the U.S. and abroad, having worked with Microsoft Online Services through its inception and several other thought-leading web-based companies such as Okta over the past few years. At Intellinet, we take a different tack to technology solutions. First of all, starting with the management consulting approach around IT strategy and business strategy, to be able to have broader and more effective organizational change outside of just technology implementations. Having been Microsoft Southeast Partner of the Year for the last 2 years and Customer Satisfaction Award from them and many others, we're again delighted to have you, our clients and prospects, on the call to learn more about this exciting innovation from Okta. On today's webinar, we will discuss the business-driven use cases around SharePoint and Okta, and we'll discuss how to use Okta for really ROI benefits within SharePoint, and then we'll close again with a Q&A session. As Gene mentioned, we'll be doing that through the chat panel, so feel free to send notes throughout the presentation, and we will facilitate that at the end of the presentation. With that, I'll turn over the presentation to Ed.
Thanks, Mark. This is Ed Sama, and I'm happy to walk through SharePoint today with everybody on the meeting here. We've got a lot of exciting technology that can really help you get the most out of SharePoint, and we're excited to be working with Intellinet here as a close partner of ours. So as Mark mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the use cases of SharePoint and ROI challenges associated with identity around SharePoint, existing tactics for how companies today manage these sort of identity limitations, and then go into a little bit of a brief overview of Okta before bringing it all together and talking specifically about how Okta can be used to increase your ROI of SharePoint and extend it to all of your users. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Leave plenty of time for Q&A, so we'll get to any specific questions that you have. Okay, oops, hold on 1 second. Okay, so wanted to just first briefly talk a little bit about SharePoint overall, what it does. I'm sure we have some people on the phone here who are very familiar, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. But this is just coming from Microsoft's website. SharePoint allows you to collaborate, manage content, allow you to create a central portal for users in the company, organize, discover, build sites and websites so you can, have a SharePoint-looking experience or completely build a custom experience on SharePoint. And it has some management tools built in. And those built-in management tools are key to some of the things I'm going to talk about in terms of how Okta is deeply integrating into SharePoint and the built-in identity capabilities within SharePoint. And so, let me advance the slide here. So kind of to summarize this at a high level, potential ways people so just a question coming in, are the slides behind the presenter's talk? So you should see a slide right now that says potential ways to get value from SharePoint. At the top, that's kind of what I'm talking about right now. Hopefully everybody, catching up to everybody is seeing that slide. And I kind of categorize it in 3 buckets. So there's sites and content. So this is the content management and collaboration sites for teams. And you've got shared folders for collaboration, informational sites that people create, and content storage. And then you can bring together these sites into kind of internal portals or external portals and websites. And so on the internal portal side, it's a central place to get to various sites, shared services across multiple subdivisions. So if you have a large organization that has a lot of different divisions and you want to allow them to access kind of a shared services, the SharePoint site can be a portal to get into those things. And then important employee notifications are part of that. And then, there's the external side of things. So SharePoint is a great platform for building a portal that allows customers and partners to access different applications and resources for your company, and then building completely custom websites building completely custom websites that are just looks like a website, but it's actually built on SharePoint in the back end. So a lot of good functionality. So what are the the challenges that can increase the costs or limit benefits of SharePoint? Well, in terms of just sites and content, data goes into silos there. So I know personally I've used SharePoint in previous companies, and a lot of times, you have a lot of different URLs to remember. There's different instances or servers of SharePoint set up that you might be using to collaborate with different teams. And it can get a little hard to keep track of those things. And employees may lose track of URLs for which team and which collaboration site. So those are kind of some of the issues there. For internal portals, employee usage can, you may be dealing with more limited employee usage than you'd want it to be. And that could be for a variety of reasons, keeping the content and the relevancy of the links to different applications relevant to those employees. And also difficult granting access across autonomous organizations. So if you have one of these, an organization, if you're in a larger organization, larger enterprise, and there are autonomous parts of the company that have different directories that they use, it can be difficult kind of giving everybody access to the same resources. And then for external portals and websites, a lot of times people need to set up additional directories to maintain their external users and their credentials for their external users and profile information. And then providing single sign-on to external users can be a challenge. And this could either use that employee's social ID or employee ID, and or just even a special username and password that you provide. But at least with that one username and password, being able to access all of your company's resources, that can be a challenge. SharePoint can provide you a place to link to a variety of different applications that you collaborate with external partners with, but it doesn't necessarily give them single sign-on into those applications. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of these things. And so what are the existing tactics for gaining more value out of SharePoint today? So overcoming these kinds of different challenges that I'm talking about. So one is just a lot of manual work, manually managing the links and making sure that you're keeping portal sites and the structure of the content up to date really well. So there's a lot of manual work that's just involved with that. And then domain consolidation is another tactic people use. So for these issues where you have as I described, an organization with a lot of different, autonomous kind of parts of the company, some companies, in order to deploy a shared service to these different organizations, they have to do some domain consolidation work. The next thing that people do is, adding directories for external users. An LDAP directory, you may need a separate identity management system around that directory or LDAP. And then you may have different LDAP directories for different applications as well that are difficult to keep in sync. And then finally, building and managing federation connectors. So a lot of this is custom work. If you have a external portal and you're trying to provide a single sign-on experience, or even for internal portals, may be difficult to build and manage federation connectors. Are the slides advancing correctly here? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I may not have. Let's see. Okay, my apologies. I think I may have not been advancing the slides correctly. Sorry about that. I think I fixed the problem here. So we'll continue from this slide. So this is the slide I was just talking to about existing tactics for gaining more value from SharePoint. So let me keep going here then, and hopefully we'll be in sync at this point. So, okay, so let me, I'm sorry about that. Okay, so let me get a little bit into now an overview of Okta. We talked a little bit about SharePoint, some of the things that SharePoint does, allows you to do, and then some of the identity challenges around SharePoint. Now, what does Okta do? So Okta is an enterprise identity platform, and it's really this cloud service that it actually sits on Amazon Web Services. We sit on 8 different availability zones of Amazon Web Services, and so we pretty much never go down. You can look at our history if you go to okta.com/trust. And so we're a cloud service that connects all of your people, either employees, customers, or external users, like, as I said, customers or partners or contractors, on any device, desktops, laptops, tablets, and smartphones, to a variety of applications. And these apps could either be in the cloud, or they can be on premises, and they could either be third-party applications like Office 365 or Box, or they can be on-premises apps and apps that you've built. So we do also integrate to .NET applications and help you provide identity and single sign-on across custom apps you've built on .NET. And then mobile apps as well. So we have Okta Mobile, which is our mobile app, and then we also support authentication into third-party mobile apps. And we connect back to on-prem identity systems. So we keep in sync your Active Directory, LDAP, or other identity systems. And an important note here is that we have multiple options in terms of how we connect to these identity systems. So if you want to keep a backup in the cloud of your credentials in case Active Directory goes down, we can have a two-way synchronization between Okta and Active Directory. However, if you would prefer to just keep your credentials on premises, your user authentication and your usernames and passwords, Okta can delegate authentication to Active Directory. So we have really a robust platform with a variety of different options. And so what does this do? Primarily, it solves the problem around users just not being able to keep track of all their usernames and passwords that they have. And this is just a problem that's gotten out of control, and this graphic kind of depicts what a lot of people resort to, which is sticky notes with different usernames and passwords. And we provide this access across a lot of different types of hardware. So from your laptop, we've got your Okta landing page. And the other thing to keep in mind here, though, is we do provide basically a portal landing page for end users to be able to access different applications. But you can completely customize this and use SharePoint as your portal. And we have a really robust platform that lets you access all of the Okta functionality through APIs. And so you can very easily pull a dynamic list of apps for an authenticated user and make it tailored to what apps they have access to and what apps they are provisioned to. And you can have that show up on a SharePoint page and totally customize the look and feel of that. So it helps you solve some of the problems we were talking about before of maintaining links manually and also keeping the content really relevant for end users. Now, on top of that, Okta can provide this access across a variety of platforms. And so not only, as I said, we have our mobile app, and which, for internal users, that's really useful to use the Okta mobile app. But if you have external users like, customers or partners, and you're developing apps for them, we can also be an authentication layer for those apps. So I want to focus in on a little bit on the application side of what we support. And so we're really this platform. We have actually thousands of applications in our application network, and we are constantly testing and maintaining the integrations to these applications. So chances are we have a good number, if not all, of the applications you use already in the catalog. And if we don't, then it's very easy for us to integrate to a new application. We actually just rolled out a new feature as well called App Creator, which is starting to open up the app integration capability that we've built to our community. So you don't even have to wait for us to integrate the app for you. It's just a wizard-based approach that lets you go in and create a new app integration through Okta. So let's tie this together now. So we talked a little bit about SharePoint, and spend a little bit of time giving an overview of Okta. So now I want to pull together really the specific ways that you can use Okta to increase the ROI from SharePoint. So what have we done here? So as I mentioned, we have our application network, and we're integrated to a variety of different applications. And so what we've done is we've built a very tailored integration to SharePoint server, the on-prem SharePoint server. And it's got two components. It has an authentication federation integration using WS-Fed. And that allows, that's the standard that Microsoft uses pretty commonly for a lot of their applications. And it's a standards-based protocol that allows you to eliminate any additional passwords and authenticate users, through just a trust mechanism from a identity provider like Okta into SharePoint. So we have support for WS-Fed, and then in addition, we've enabled the SharePoint people picker to query Okta. So if you're familiar with SharePoint, this is basically the thing within SharePoint that lets you, when you go in to assign a certain user rights to a certain page or resource, allows you to choose people to put in that to give them access or deny access to. And so we've basically built a small downloadable module that you install onto SharePoint, onto your server. And what that does is it allows SharePoint, when it pulls up that that sort of list of people allows it to go and query Okta using our APIs to, in real time, pull the list of users coming from Okta. So this has a lot of benefits. So first, you can see Okta users in groups when assigning access rights within SharePoint. And you can eliminate typing errors when looking up users. So, without this type of people picker integration, you could sort of still put in an email address of a user, and when that user kind of gets federated in, SharePoint would recognize it, but you'd have to type it exactly correctly. So this, through the query mechanism, it sort of allows that autocomplete and allows you to look up usernames and email addresses. This uses our platform REST APIs. So I mentioned that we have a really robust platform layer on Okta that exposes a lot of our functionality as APIs that you can use to build a lot of custom user experiences. And so this actually integrates using that platform layer. And this is user management. It's basically just-in-time provisioning. And what happens is when a user authenticates to Okta and then they get federated to SharePoint, SharePoint in real time, based on who that user is, and it looks up, what groups that user has access to. And so if there's a certain SharePoint resource that gives rights to that user's group, it'll allow that user to access that resource. And a great consideration here is that you can enable this functionality individually for each SharePoint farm or site that you have. So if you want the configuration to be different, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. You can customize it. If you're kind of wondering still a little bit about this people picker thing, I described it a little bit, and I always struggle with which of these slides to put first. But this is basically what it looks like. The SharePoint Server 2010 and 2013 are the two that we support, and it looks a little bit different in each of them, but it's the same idea: is that you go to your directory listing and you can pull up the users that are in Okta, or do an autocomplete, or if you type the user's name. And an important thing here is that this doesn't replace any integration you have from SharePoint to Active Directory. It's just supplemental. So you can definitely maintain your integration between, if you have SharePoint already set up to authenticate users against Active Directory, but then you have other groups of users that you want to extend access to, that's a great way to use Okta, because then you can put those users in Okta or connect those users to Okta somehow, and then allow all of them access into that same SharePoint site. So what are the different things that this allows you to do? So first thing here, first thing is increasing the usage of SharePoint. So it makes SharePoint easier to use because, as I said, you can maintain that list of links really more dynamically using Okta and having it pull that list of apps that are relevant to the user and are the apps that the user actually uses and is provisioned to. And in addition, user authenticates with no additional password. So I'm going to talk a little bit as well about integrated integrated Windows authentication, where if you have that set up, then the user can just get directly into SharePoint, even through Okta, without entering an additional password. And Okta can also be used to federate users from other identity providers. So if you have a user that's coming in from a partner, you can connect to that partner's identity system, and then that user doesn't have to have an additional password either. But it does all this while keeping it easy to manage as well. So as I said, the changes are dynamic based on the automated provisioning and deprovisioning. And automation also ensures users can access the right applications. So to talk a little bit, going to go just explain the desktop single sign-on experience. The way it works is a user would authenticate to an AD domain controller, and then the user would go in and try to access Okta. And what Okta does at that point is, rather than requiring a password, it just basically uses the Okta IWA agent, which you see also here on the bottom left, which accepts the authentication that the user did with the AD domain controller. It basically just trusts that authentication, and directly then lets users into SharePoint, as well as cloud applications that you may be linking to from your SharePoint site. And so, eliminates the additional password need, allows users to get to applications with no login page. They just log on to the domain and can access SharePoint with no additional logon. Very secure. It uses the Kerberos integrated Windows authentication, and it's easy to deploy. So it leverages our lightweight agent that's running under IIS. The second big area I talked about is around that kind of directory consolidation, around the directory consolidation issue. And so with this, basically Okta allows you to avoid having to do that. We have connected multiple customers now where there are a lot of different domains that they have, and they don't want to go and synchronize them all or deploy a costly solution to kind of integrate them all. So what Okta does is allows you to just go ahead and deploy an Okta agent for each of these different domains, and all those users can then get pulled into Okta and consolidated in Okta. And so it allows you to do this with distributed AD domains, whether they're trusted or untrusted. You can do AD or non-AD user stores. And then you can do this for SharePoint as just an app on its own, or use SharePoint as a portal into other apps, and Okta handles the single sign-on into all of those other behind-the-scenes applications that are connected to SharePoint. And those can be on-prem web apps as well. So, gives you a lot of flexibility in bringing on additional users into SharePoint that are coming from a lot of different domains. And the final thing is really around external collaboration. I'm going to go a little bit into more detail on this one because it's an important area of functionality and something that we've invested in a lot at Okta. The standard scenario here is you're connecting SharePoint to an Active Directory, and if it's just a one-to-one kind of connection, then you're probably okay. But now, what if you want to power a customer or partner portal that's built on SharePoint? So what you have is now you have users that you want to bring in from, that are not in your Active Directory. So what Okta allows you to do is be the user. You can use Okta as the user store for your external users. And use it as kind of like a hybrid cloud directory where you are using a hybrid of directories between your on-prem Active Directory as well as Okta in the cloud with additional users. And the primary way of authenticating users is just by giving them an Okta username and password. But you can also actually connect Okta to social ID or enterprise identity providers or third-party identity sources. So if your customer or partner has their own Active Directory, you can actually connect to that Active Directory using Okta. All they'd have to do is install Okta's agent, and then you would be able to see all of those users in SharePoint, as well as authenticate them, as well as see them in the people picker and all of that I talked about. So it's a pretty powerful platform for really centralizing, or really bringing together all the different types of users from different places that you want to be able to easily collaborate within SharePoint or provide access to. And Okta handles everything in the middle here. So as I said, the cloud directory and handles user management capability, provisioning users into applications that might be part of your portal. You can manage users as separate organizations. So when we say organization management, let's say you want to provide access to a few very large distributors and to your portal. And you want those distributors to manage their own users. You want them to be able to, on their own, decide who from their company can access your portal. You can use Okta for that and give them complete autonomy. So actually set up separate Okta orgs for each of those partners and give them access to those orgs and let them manage access to their own users into your portal. So a pretty powerful identity platform that just gives you a lot of different options. Let me talk a little bit more about the external use cases, really connecting partners and customers. So Okta is really an identity service, as I said, that that serves kind of two different functions. So it's identity management for internal users for your company, where you've got applications in the cloud, you've got applications on your network, and Okta is allowing your employees to access all of these different apps. But on the other hand, it's the same service that can really be used as a federation service provider, where you're using it as the identity layer for your service or collection of services that you're exposing to outside users. And so in that sense, if you think about this big bubble as your external sites, Okta can be like the front end and provide that kind of unifying layer that brings all these things together and allows you to take a best of breed approach. And if you use a bunch of Microsoft technology like Office 365 and SharePoint, but then let's say you have a handful of other non-Microsoft apps like Box or Zendesk, you can put Okta in front of that and have a consolidated kind of integrated view of the user across all of these things. So this really helps you decrease the cost and maximize ROI for external sites. So it allows you to get your site up faster. We have pre-built SAML integrations and, as I mentioned, WS-Fed as well. And in-product UI config options, or we allow you to build your own UI using our APIs. And we actually publish our APIs on GitHub. So we're really embracing the developer here and making it easy for you to use Okta as a cloud-based development platform. All this really helps you increase usage by your customers and partners, providing single sign-on, allowing partners to authenticate using their own directory, and decrease costs. So you don't need to, those extra directories you have to set up, they're not just a management burden, but it's a cost. So using Okta as a cloud directory just comes with our service. We've had customers talk about the pace of innovation here, and the reality is you could go and rebuild a lot of legacy or different apps that you've built over the years. You could go and rebuild them and have them all authenticate against a single directory and do a lot of that work in order to kind of get a single view of the user. But that's just sort of, it's not really work that's helping you innovate or move faster. It's kind of just a engineering burden for you. And so, we've had customers of ours say this and say, they have multiple sites and they wanted a single view of the user, and it was just easier to deploy Okta and get that benefit and allow those different teams to still innovate independently. So that's kind of a big thing here that kind of frees you from having to constantly do this type of identity integration work. So and the big picture that we look at here is really using Okta for external sites across websites, and so these are consumer sites or e-commerce sites where things like self-service registration or password life cycle is important. Portals where it's like a B2B sales service or product information site that often may use different kinds of applications on the back end. It's not a single monolithic website. Maybe different applications that your partners need to be able to access. But you want to kind of be able to customize the user experience a little bit. And then cloud services, where we can really support if you're also deploying a full SaaS offering. We can be the identity layer for your app, and providing cloud directory, single sign-on user management across all these scenarios. And from a technology perspective, this is the bigger picture. I talked about what this picture looks like with just SharePoint as the app, but it's really all these different kinds of apps, cloud apps, on-premises, and custom apps connecting to all your users coming in from different kinds of authentication sources. And enabling SAML enablement or WS-Fed enablement is a key piece here. So we support, if your app is on one of these, if you develop on, say, Java or LAMP or any of these other platforms, chances are you want to enable it for SAML. But if you're writing ASP.NET apps, we also support WS-Fed integration into ASP.NET. Just going to skip through a few slides here. So, kind of just summarizing the picture here, connecting whether they're individuals coming in or organizations, authenticating through us as a cloud directory, social identity, enterprise identity, and then connecting to all your different kinds of applications. So to summarize here, we talked a lot about SharePoint today, but we really support the full Microsoft environment. So SharePoint, Office 365, ASP.NET, Windows Intune, Microsoft Dynamics, and being a really more robust identity layer for you to be able to manage access into all of these applications. And it's just part of really our overall app integration. So not only are we great for the Microsoft environment, but if you do use a handful of non-Microsoft apps, then you don't have to worry about that either, because we've got that covered. I'm sure that this slide was really intended for a broader audience. I'm sure this audience is fairly familiar with Office 365, but you do have this problem of connecting it back to Windows Server on-prem, and so if you're rolling out Office 365 and you're thinking about Okta for SharePoint, you can also, if you have Okta, also allow Okta to handle this problem as well, which is authenticating users into Office 365. And the full picture really looks like this, where you've got customers and partners coming in to maybe a SharePoint portal, and then you've got employees that you're trying to provide single sign-on to. Those employees may be using some thick clients like Outlook or Lync. They may be using some cloud apps, Office 365, maybe something else like Zendesk or Box or Salesforce. And you want to provide access to all these things and manage it in a central place. And you need options. So, talking again about our options for integrating to Active Directory, we're not just pushing passwords into the cloud. We can do password sync. It's actually a two-way password sync. So if a user changes their password in the cloud, it can synchronize it back to Active Directory. Or we can just delegate authentication to Active Directory, so you don't have to worry about syncing passwords at all. And then, supporting that full scope of, SharePoint, ASP.NET, and cloud apps. Okta is a market leader in identity and access management in the cloud. We're a modern identity service for all your users' device and apps, covering single sign-on, strong authentication. We have a built-in multi-factor authentication solution and provisioning analytics. As I mentioned, the thousands of pre-integrated applications in our Okta Applications Network. And we integrate and extend the legacy identity infrastructure. We have a veteran team at Okta. So our founder was from Salesforce.com. He actually built the platform at Salesforce and then decided, as he saw companies moving to the cloud, that identity is really a huge pain point. And so there's a reason why he founded Okta. We also have many executives from Microsoft and other companies such as Oracle and PeopleSoft. We're a zero downtime service architecture, and we have a professional services team with a deep identity background. So we work closely with Intelenet on engagements where we're working with a customer of Intelenet, and our professional services team can provide that secondary level of support. We also have a dedicated support team as well. So when you're looking at Okta, you're not just getting a sort of the agility of a startup, but it's also the really an enterprise grade service and support team. And just a couple quotes from some of our customers here. We deployed Okta at Gatwick Airport, which is a public airport that has very high standards for security, as you can imagine. They did a very comprehensive security review of Okta and determined that our enterprise grade service was the only solution that could meet their technical, operational, and security requirements. And then Allergan, another customer of ours, they're a Fortune 500, I believe, biotech company, and they're a close partner of ours. And they say Okta makes our problems their own, and it's why we rely on them to make us successful. So we take customer success very seriously, and it's really our number one tenet as a company. So that wraps up the content of the deck here, my presentation. I do want to just highlight that we have our first ever users conference coming in the beginning of November. It's called Octane 13. It's in San Francisco, and we'd love for you to join us there if you're able to make it. And we've got some early bird pricing as well, so you can save 50% if you go to the website Octane 13 and you use the code OCTA50. And with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Mark, who will have some concluding comments here, and then we'll open up to Q&A after that.
Great, thanks, Ed. And you would mute your line, would be great. If 50% off wasn't good enough, we thought we'd add some further context of free. So we've got 5 free offerings for those on the phone to be able to look at. Okta Cloud Connect is an Okta product set that really allows you to trial it in a production environment. It's the full feature set, but only limited to 1 application. Limited users and no time limit. So it's a great avenue for you to trial this. We can look at POCs with our group and the Okta PS group as well. But this is a great avenue for you to take a production run at this as well in your environment. If you want to look at an enterprise-wide free trial, we're able to do that as well through the URL that you'll see up top. Unlimited applications for a fixed time period, and we can help set you up in the strategy and operations of that as well. 3 other free offerings that Intellinet looks at from a broader cloud readiness jumpstart. Again, the timing for this, these free avenues are here by this Friday, the 27th. The first is a half-day strategy session. So if this is of interest and has piqued your interest in all things cloud, both towards the Microsoft Cloud of Office 365, Azure, and Intune, as well as where Okta may fit into your overall cloud strategy, as well as overall identity strategy for premise, cloud, and hybrid type applications. We'd love to be able to do a half-day strategy session with you, our customers. And then beyond that, the middle box is really geared towards Microsoft's 3-day free, it's called the Fast Track Pilot Program for Office 365. It is noted only available to Microsoft EA customers, or those that have bought an enterprise agreement with Microsoft. And there's further DPS vouchers, or sort of deployment planning vouchers, that they allow for that Intellinet is able to use. For those that don't have an EA, but still want to get a better understanding of Office 365 and how that relates, whether it's Office 365, Intune, or Azure, relates into your environment, we'd be happy to do some trial avenues with you guys on a free 1-day assessment as well. So we appreciate your time. What I want to do is turn it over to Jean, who will be moderating our Q&A from some of those that have come through the panel, as well as some that were sent beforehand. Herself and Ed, as well as Chad Cooper, our Intellinet's cloud strategy lead, will be able to address those as they. So if you want to open up that, Jean, we appreciate your time, and you'll help facilitate those that have come through, and feel free to send questions as well through the chat panel for further questions that come through.
Great, thanks, Mark. Just a reminder for everyone, please, if you have questions, please type them in, and we'll answer those questions as best as we can. There were several questions that came through the registration process, and the first one is to you, Ed. And the first question is, how would using Okta assist with an external scenario for adding external users?
That's a great question, Jean. Yeah, I talked a little bit about using Okta for external users, and it really allows you to decrease costs by not having to set up an additional directory, and just easily allow for collaboration with those external users. So you can add users into Okta through a variety of means, through a bulk load in. Or through our user interface in the admin panel. And then, as I said, you could also connect Okta to the directories of your external partners, which is a really powerful mechanism if you have close relationships with certain partners.
Great. Second question, it's similar, or it adds on to the first question. And Ed, this is again to you. Would you be able to avoid AD consolidation by using Okta?
Yeah, that's correct. And that was one of the other topics that we hit on earlier in the presentation, where it's really, we see it in there's a variety of different sort of business scenarios that look kind of similar. So you have, conglomerates that have a variety of different businesses. You have companies that do a lot of M&A. And so they're constantly going through this effort of bringing in new companies and integrating their IT infrastructure. And then you've got franchises, and franchises also have to deal with, a lot of independent businesses that they need to provide certain shared services to. So for all those scenarios, this directory consolidation issue comes up, and it's more than just sort of a one-time consolidation. It's like, how do you manage autonomous parts of the organization? And so Okta can connect to all those different directory systems and allow different parts of the company to maintain autonomy, but still provide a shared service and authentication into a shared application.
That's great. Thanks, Ed. It looks like here, Scott, you have a question about learn more about Okta's integration to Azure. With that, I'm going to turn that over to Chad Cooper, who is the cloud architect with Intelenet.
Great. So all of Azure, of which infrastructure backend you're using, Office 365, the Azure development platforms or whatnot, use the same Active Directory platform. So you can integrate with Okta with the Azure platform by simply tying it to an Azure directory, being that a Azure directory that's part of a cloud service you're using, like Office 365, or a standalone Azure directory that you're using for some form of a customized solution that you've developed either through the Azure platform services or the Azure infrastructure services. You can integrate those whichever way you wish, and at that point it just ties together either the on-prem Active Directory to the Azure Active Directory, or as was mentioned earlier, you can just manage the users directly from the Okta portal there and have them flow right into AD in Azure as well.
Great, thank you. Another question that came through the registration process. Ed, this is for you. With mergers and acquisitions, we all know that that's unavoidable, but can we use Okta to grant access to internal SharePoint sites?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I talked about, it's great for both the internal and for external use cases. I may have already answered that question with my more lengthy answer to the last question, but another data point I'll throw out there is just that I know I've heard from some of our customers that have started to use Okta for SharePoint now, that they often are in this process of where they have to deploy additional SharePoint farms or sites in order to handle these different kinds of users. So you can avoid that if you want to just kind of consolidate resources and use less SharePoint instances. Okta can help you do that.
Great. Since we don't have any more questions through the chat panel, and these were the top questions that we saw come through the registration process, with that, I want to thank you all for your time. I'm going to turn it back over to Mark to close us out.
All right. Well, next steps, obviously, there is a survey that you'll see both in the chat panel there as well as on the screen. We'd encourage you to take a quick few minutes to do a survey. That survey will be your opportunity to be able to be selected for to win a Microsoft Surface RT, and that survey closes today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So, as I mentioned, the 3 cloud assessments are available free of charge. Just note that within your survey. Or if you're interested in the Okta free avenues towards the Cloud Connect or the free trial, or wanted to talk further about the strategy of all these products as they relate together, feel free to note that on your survey. With that, look at future opportunities for us to talk with you guys about Intelenet services, and Okta will have one last third seminar in this series with Okta. It will come up October 23rd at 2 p.m. We'll be sending out information on that as well for further ROI models and business cases for use within your environment. So thanks so much for your time. We will again be sending out information and a recording link tomorrow. And if you have questions, feel free to note that on your survey. Otherwise, have a great afternoon.